Today we are going to talk about The House of Asterion by Jorge Luis Borges. This is a very short story, but it is brilliant, mysterious, and unforgettable. At first, it seems like the voice of a lonely man speaking from inside a strange and endless house. But by the end, Borges reveals that the story is actually a retelling of a famous myth, from a completely unexpected point of view. That is what makes it so powerful. What if the so-called monster of a myth could finally tell his own side of the story? What if the creature people fear is not simply violent or cruel, but lonely, misunderstood, and trapped? That is the question Borges asks in The House of Asterion. Instead of showing us a hero fighting a beast, he gives us the voice of the beast himself. And suddenly, the story becomes more human, more tragic, and more unsettling. The narrator is Asterion. He tells us that he lives alone in a vast house. He describes the space as endless, full of halls, doors, courtyards, and passages. At first, he sounds proud and strange, but as he continues speaking, we start to sense something deeper. He is not simply describing a house, he is describing a life of isolation. And little by little, we begin to realize that Asterion is deeply alone. Asterion's house is not just a building. It feels endless, repetitive, and impossible to escape. That is why the house can also be understood as a labyrinth. The labyrinth is important because it reflects Asterion's condition. He is physically enclosed, but he is also emotionally and spiritually trapped. The house becomes a symbol of his mind, his isolation, and the strange world he can never fully leave. Asterion claims that he is not lonely. He tries to make his life sound meaningful, even playful. He says he runs through the halls, invents games, and entertains himself. But everything in the story suggests the opposite. His words reveal repetition, emptiness, and longing. This contrast makes the story more moving, because even while he denies his loneliness, we can clearly feel it. At the end of the story, Borges gives us the twist. We realize that Asterion is not just an ordinary lonely man. He is the Minotaur. This changes everything. Suddenly, the endless house becomes the labyrinth from Greek mythology. And the narrator we have been listening to is the very creature that myths usually describe as a monster. This twist forces us to rethink everything we believed about him. This story is powerful because Borges makes us feel sympathy for the so-called monster. Instead of presenting Asterion as something terrifying, he presents him as a voice, a mind, and a lonely being. We see the labyrinth from the inside. We hear the thoughts of the one who is usually feared, not understood. And because of that, Borges transforms a familiar myth into something emotional, philosophical, and deeply human. The labyrinth can symbolize many things. It can represent isolation, it can represent identity, and it can represent the prison of one's own existence. For Asterion, the labyrinth is not only where he lives, it is the shape of his whole life. It traps him physically, but it also reflects his emotional separation from others. That is why the labyrinth feels less like an adventure setting and more like a tragic condition. We should still read The House of Asterion today, because it teaches us how perspective can change everything. A story we think we already know becomes something new when told from another point of view. It also challenges us to question labels like monster. Who gets called a monster? Who gets to tell the story? And what truths do we miss when we only hear one side? These questions still matter today. In one simple idea, The House of Asterion is about a lonely creature inside a labyrinth who reminds us that even monsters may have a human side. Borges retells an old myth, but instead of focusing on the hero, he focuses on the one left alone in darkness. That is why the story is so memorable. It is short, quiet, and clever, but also sad and deeply meaningful. For more simple lessons about literature and stories, follow Lingualistica. See you in the next one.